So here we go. Today's speaker is Karthik. He has around 2 decades of, Gani please note, 2 decades experience in financial markets. Saurabh bete, ye aapne pucha private equity fund management. So moment you wrote private equity bete, I knew whom to call. Investment banking, retail banking. He worked with SBI Capital Markets, as I said. Abhishek, please note SBI Capital Markets, right? And then after that, he joined SBI promoted private equity fund, Oman India Joint Investment Fund, right? And the best part about Karthik ji is he knows everybody in the circle of investment banks. Very grounded, very grounded. Quit his job, started his own venture, and raised private equity funding by showing a one-pager, what we call as elevator pitch. So not only does Karthik ji preach, he also practices. So, sir, I would like you to talk about, because I've not given it. I wanted you to talk about that, but it's okay. Can you talk about your new venture, sir? Because it's important that everybody knows. Dr. Vinod Nair is from Cochin. So
Okay.
somewhere there will be some break, which I am very keen that all of you all should have. So please do talk about your new venture, or rather now it is 2 years old.
No, it is about a little over 4 years old, but we have been in research for about 3 years.
So what, can you just give some idea about your new venture so that somebody or other can help you there, please?
Sure. So my background, Anil sir has very well mentioned. I started with retail banking immediately after my graduation. I graduated from Mumbai University in Commerce. After that, I have worked in Times Bank, and then after 1 year, I decided to pursue my MBA. Post which I was in 1999, I got a campus placement through ICICI, where I worked in the retail side in brokerage. After that, I shifted to insurance. So I have got experience on both sides of insurance, which is like both general insurance as well as life insurance. And I have also had exposure to reinsurance. And after which I came to SBI Caps. SBI Caps is a karma bhumi for both sir and myself. It's a phenomenal organization where I've done business, given an opportunity to do business all across the world. And it was like the kind of exposure that we got right from doing deals in project finance, mergers and acquisitions, private equity, capital markets, and everything in capital markets. And that is a place where we developed our network to such an extent that we worked very closely. I worked very closely with Finance Ministry, Department of Disinvestment, helped the government to do disinvestment for their companies like NALCO, Shipping Corporation of India, Cochin Shipyard, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So at one hand, where we used to deal with just big behemoths of industry, on the other hand, we also got a chance to do fundraise for my first company for which I did the private equity raise was about 6 crore rupees way back in 2007. We are still in touch, 2007 and today is about 14 years. I still speak to the promoter. What happens in investment banking is that forget all the money part, money comes and goes. You get an opportunity to make wonderful friends, wonderful relationships. Wherever you need anyone, they are there, they reach out to you, you reach out to them. Our life has largely become like Vodafone. Wherever you go, the network follows. So the more network you have, the better, your exposure towards the world grows, your knowledge increases, and all said and done, you get new experiences in life. And that is what I think one of the biggest advantages that you have in investment banking. Post investment banking, I moved on to Oman India Joint Investment Fund, which is so for a larger part of my life, we were basically seeking investments, wherein we used to raise funds for banks, financial institutions, small and medium enterprises. So working in SBI Caps gave me exposure to all sectors, including right from textile to technology on one side, and then right from real estate to manufacturing. We have done probably everything, every single sector in my long tenure in SBI Caps. When I came to Oman India Fund, I've invested in one of the large private sector banks, which eventually got sold to Kotak Bank. And I have also done representations on boards of large private listed companies. And this is during my tenure in Oman India Fund. When I was almost about to cross my 40, it was my deep desire that I wanted to give back something towards the community, something towards the nation, something that I wanted to do towards nation building. And my exposure in SBI Caps gave me a lot of insight of what is actually happening on the banking space regarding financial inclusion. I was very sure that we are marching very quickly towards something called as digital banking. And what you are seeing as digital banking today, I've already had an experience with Society General way back in 2009, 2008, 2007, 2008, where we helped one of the subsidiaries of Society General in Paris to try to acquire and identify one company here. And you're always surprised that, what we call as digital banking today, we already experienced this in 2007, 2008. They had a bank called a Self-Trade Bank, which was there largely in France and Italy. And I got an opportunity to visit that bank there. And then because we were doing an acquisition for them here in India. Of course, that did not work out because Lehman Brothers came in between. Otherwise, what do you see that this avatar of all this neo banks, as we call them, India would have had it probably 2009, 2010. It's only that today we are seeing this kind of neo banks, but we all have seen this way back. And what was the passion? The passion was that, there is a big divide which was growing between India and Bharat. And what we saw is that at one hand, where you are actually having a lot of banks which are wanting to, they are getting digitized and they are serving a lot of people, a lot of new customers. But the problem was that a large chunk of customers, which are like nano enterprises, people who want to borrow anywhere between 2 lakh, 1 lakh to about 10 lakh rupees, are neither served by microfinance institutions nor served by the banking under MSME. So it has been my challenge saying that you walk into any bank and then try to get a 5 lakh loan for your business in one shot. It is not there. And when you compare this with other countries, like even, I'm not talking about China, I'm talking about Vietnam, I'm talking about Indonesia, talking about Philippines, they get it so easily. So why not in India? So the problem is that there are a lot of businessmen who are like your istriwalas, guy who is basically having a small grocery shop, somebody who is running a welding ka dukan and all that. So those people don't know how to manage their money, because for them, their business and their family is the same thing. One is the same thing. They don't, so they have one chit in which they'll keep on writing all their accounts. And once they land up at the bank will ask them, where is your cash flow? Where is your P&L? Where is your balance sheet? They don't do anything. So basically what they do is that they go back and take money from the informal system, as we call them as loan sharks. And they are basically exposed to operation where they are charged 40% rate of interest. Can you imagine? 40% rate of interest. How can you do business like this? Because what actually typically started happening is that if you're going to pay 40% as rate of interest, then you have to do kapla somewhere. No? So what used to happen is that we had a big problem with regarding tax evasion. And tax evasion was so rampant that, after GST, all these people who were evading tax suddenly saw their businesses evaporating, or they tried to shrink their businesses. These things don't come out in public, because the press only likes to speak about larger issues. But when I started working at a grassroots level, when I was in SBI Caps, this is thanks to our management who asked me to do a lot of field surveys and go and interact with small promoters. That is when the urge came, wherein I said, I want to basically dedicate my remaining part of my life, wherein we want to do this financial inclusion for this nano enterprises, which are basically left out. Where did we start? We said that in India, we have something called a Samaj, which is like community platforms. And there are a lot of people who are a part of these community platforms. And how do you unite them? Because people go to the community only for two reasons. One is marriage, second is death. Otherwise, the community is basically restricted to having Anil sir, like Onam celebrations or probably any cultural celebration. So what we did is that we said, let us take this community platform. And I have never read about history. Why I'm saying this is all relevant is that I'll tell you how quickly it was easier to raise funds for this kind of an idea. I never read history. So 300 years back, I figured out that why such huge temples were built in South India, because that is where commerce used to happen. People used to get loans. The king used to come and collect taxes there. So we said, when everything is organized as a community, we have information everywhere. Why don't we collect this information? Why should information live in isolation? And why should we actually have Google and all these people who are building such phenomenal systems digitally take this information? What happens to those people who don't start generating information? So this was our contribution, where we said that we will basically build our enterprise to do financial inclusion based on community. So we went to the Samajas. So we went to Nayar Samajam, we went to Gujarati Samajam, and then we went to a few Arya Samaj. Then we tried to do some, we tried to do some CSR work there. What was our CSR? Our CSR was very easy. It's very, very dynamic. It's very different. So we do matrimony for these people because that is one of the biggest problems, and it is very easy for us to get into the community. So once we did these platforms, then we got an exposure of what the community is comprised of. And it is at that point of time that we introduced something called as community credit. It was the first thing. And we have been extremely motivated by, the Grameen Foundation, which basically by Dr. Mohammad Yunus, who we consider as our guru. And this is for the existing enterprises. We said that we'll do nano finance. And it took us a long time. It took us a long time to go and convince the bank to agree to our model of financing. So it was very difficult. So very uphill task, So you go and tell people that I'm going to start a new way of financing. I'll start a new separate credit underwriting. So the people started telling that either I have lost it or probably this is not going to work, one of the two. But the perseverance paid off, and then the one bank agreed that yes, you guys are doing a good job. Let us take a chance with this. So this is what we are doing for the existing enterprises. So for the new enterprises, what we are doing that, we decided that, say, for somebody after the COVID, this person has moved from a city to his town and wants to put up a fabrication workshop. He has got about 5 lakh rupees requirement. We tell the community people, why don't you come in and contribute? This is social capital. Don't, instead of giving it as a donation, why don't you invest in this person? We'll ensure that we'll give this money back to you. So when the intention was clear, we were very clear that, we don't want to make any personal money for ourselves because the remainder of the life is dedicated towards what we want to contribute to the society. It became quite clear. It became very evident that, there was good amount of investor interest in what we are trying to do, but we did not want to raise a lot of funds. So there was a client of mine with whom I went and showed my vision, and I said, this is what I want to do. And he was so aligned to this because the storytelling was probably so powerful that it came from the depth of my heart. And he basically gave me a blank check and said that you can write whatever you want. It's not that we are irresponsible in taking this. We are not drawn all the money that has been convicted. But yes, drawing money, if somebody is standing as a backstop and he says that I'm there for your cause, it makes a lot of, gives a lot of comfort. I think God has been immensely great to support us with all this. So that's what we are doing in short. And this has been my journey. And yes, the current private equity market is, extremely motivating and challenging at the same time. And, anybody like me who comes from 3 generations of people who have been, working, who have been in service class, it gives a dream, it gives wings, because today the whole ecosystem is there to support you, provided your conviction is there, your idea is good, and then you can make money for them.
Let us start with a question which I would like to ask you, sir. Sorry, I'm digressing, but a very important question. What is the message for family managed business? How will a investor look at family managed businesses?
Okay, so let me give you a little history of private equity investment. That is what has India seen. So when I started my career and I used to attend the private equity seminars in India, I still remember the year of 2003. And we have something called as India Venture Capital Association, and I was very interested in private equity right from that during that time. I think I was about 27. I was a tad younger actually. I was about 26, 27 at that point of time. This is a time when I used to, and there were about 45 investors at that point of time who attended this seminar. I'm just giving you an idea. So 2004, 2005 when I attended, the number was about 235, and about in 2005 when I attended this, the number was about 780. So you can just imagine what is the explosion that is happening with private equity investors in India. So to begin with, there was not much of private equity investment in the country. There were not much of investors there. And today it is such an explosion. I'm saying that there are so many PE investors, and then they are saying, I'm sector fund, I'm sector agnostic fund, I'm a large fund, I'm a VC fund, I'm a seed fund. So it is like you stumble across and then you will find an investor. It is almost become that the whole universe has become so large here in India. So that is a very, very good news for somebody who is starting off with. So you have people cutting checks right from say, 25 lakh, 50 lakh, because when we started our careers and when we used to see, private equity used to say that you borrow from friends and family, like the typical Infosys story, build it up. And once you build it up, then they will come in probably with, say, a 10 crore. A 10 crore in 2006 is probably, in my opinion, equivalent to about 40 crores today. So I'm saying times change, but things are only getting extremely better. So we are seeing a lot of influx of private equity funds, and there has also been very bitter experiences with a lot of funds. Like we are saying, everything is not paved in gold, or it's not been a bed of roses for people. People have burned their hands terribly. I know for funds who have completely lost, say they have made 10 investments, out of which 7 investments, they have not even got their money back, forget any profits. They have to just simply write the investments down. So what actually happens is that for private equity funds, it has been extremely a mixed bag. It has not been an easy job at all for those people. So technically, where we see what happens to the PE fund is that the decision-making process is extremely, extremely difficult. Because let me give you, you asked for new entrepreneurs who wanted to raise funds. I'll tell you from the fund side what is the issue. So from the fund side, the issue is that say if there are 100 funds and there are about 100 companies, okay, I think that's a very skewed kind of a thing. So let us take, there are 100 funds and there are 1,000 companies, okay, and 1,000 funds make presentations to 100 funds. So every fund sees about 10. It is 1:10, right? Now the problem is, out of 1,000 companies, the funds basically end up liking 50 companies. Okay. Now the problem is, all the 100 funds want to run only behind those 50 companies. So unless you make the cut, unless you're a part of those 50 companies, you know who is running behind whom. So if you're running behind someone, then that someone is going to dictate. And if that someone is running behind who, you will actually end up dictating. Now, what basically causes that this side of 50 and that side of 950 is a huge gap. So there are 950 people who are going and begging every day to private equity funds, saying that, you look at me, and the desperation increases when, like, I recently got one proposal of a company based out of Calcutta, and you look at how poorly it was marketed, unfortunately. So they went to a banker, and when you do an evaluation, there would be about 53 funds who might be interested in that kind of a business. The investment banker did a very shoddy job of making a very bad presentation and bad financial model. And then he did a further crime, in my opinion, of circulating this presentation to all the 50 investors at the same go. 35 investors came back and said, we are not interested. And the balance 15 did not even bother to respond back. What happens to this company? You get only one shot with the investors, correct? And it's like, probably when you want to date a girl, or the girl wants to date you, let us put it the other way, and you have basically been extremely clumsy in your first meeting, that's the end of it. You don't get a second chance. The same way with PE investors, like they are also human beings. So what happens is that if your first darshan, as I call, I don't think there is any equivalent word in English for darshan. It's a Sanskrit word. So the first darshan, if it is messed up or it is botched up, that is game over. Nobody will give you second chance in this world, because they're constantly keeping on seeing the other one. And what actually happens is that where, Anil sir, you asked me, where does the process start from? Whether it is family business or not family business, let us not even get into that, sir. Let us see what are the 3 stages in which private equity happens. And I am also a very big fan of Philip Kotler, and even I like peace. So let me stick to my piece. So the first stage, yeah.
One sec. So I just realized for the audience, it's extremely important to understand that, because Karthik sir, I told, will be SPJN students. It just struck me that there are esteemed seniors like Dr. Neeraj Kumar also here. Vinod sir knows this, right? So what we are talking about when you say private equity investors, and I apologize, sir, we should have said this right at the beginning, Gani would know it, is that these are outside investors who will invest in a company. So when we say PE, we are referring to private equity investors. And when we say when you have a company you want to grow, you will get these funds coming and investing. Typically, the success stories have come from first generation entrepreneurs. That's why my first question to sir was, do you encourage family managed businesses? He says there is no such distinction for outside investors. In fact, a big learning that has come out is, and I would now request sir to continue, is that there is a demand supply gap. There are so many few good companies that most of the funds chase those few good companies. And most important, as Gani has very nicely pointed out in the chat, all of you should please keep your questions also coming, right? So that I can, Karthik sir has said, I'll address as many questions as possible beyond what we have decided. Is the first impression really counts? First impression really counts. If you do a shoddy job there, that could be the end of your the brief interaction, right? Life may give you a second chance, but it's always better that you get it right the first time. Back to you, sir.
Okay. So like I said, I'm a very big fan of Philip Kotler, and I have developed my own 3 Ps of investing. And I believe this, and I have seen over and over again, right from my days when I used to raise money for clients, and right from those days when actually I have invested in companies, and the third avatar of mine, when I have sought funds for myself. Please remember, there are 3 avatars in which you can actually go and raise money. The first avatar is called as premise. What is the premise? The premise is basically the foundation on which you are going and asking for money to people. You have to be an extremely good storyteller. That is given. You have to be an extremely good storyteller, and you have to connect with the end audience to whom we are giving this story. Now, what comes in this premise is that, what is this business all about? How are you going to make money for yourself and for the business and for the investor? Okay, what is happening post-COVID is the things are a little changing. People are saying, don't put money as a stakeholder, put money as an enabler, right? And where we were getting wrong completely is that India unfortunately celebrates people who raise money. But is that the only thing? Money, once you get money, that is the mere start of what is going to happen to you. You have seen so many people who have got ruined by money. I'm saying you all come from family businesses. Even in your own families, you would have seen a lot of people who have got ruined with money. So money is an enabler. It is basically, it is like water. Whichever container you put water, it will take its form. So what happens in premise is that you have to be extremely clear. Why are you raising money? So this is why. And everybody, I would recommend, and if you have not heard this guy called as Simon Sinek, you have to please go and see what he says. So please Google Simon Sinek in Las Vegas. It's a 40-minute YouTube chat, and then you will fall in love with that guy. He basically has a talk which basically says, start with why. And I will not go too much into detail because, you know, everybody, so somebody has asked, why not what? Why, how, what? Okay. So he basically says that is the first thing when you start, when you say why, start with why, you know. So that is the best way to start. So that is the premise. So we are going and telling the investor, the best part of when you go and meet an investor, you're trying to convince him, saying that what is my business all about. So here is not looking at what is going to be your cash flow, because you have got nothing to prove. You have got something called as minimum viable product, which basically says that, okay, this product is trying to do, or my idea is something, and if he resonates with that idea. So in premise, there is your idea and a brief product and some proof that this is basically working. Okay. So that is what we say as premise. And here is where the seed funding comes from. The more you go towards trying to prove your point, the investor would basically go to the next P, which is called as promise. Okay, I have given you a little money, or you have got money from your father, or your money is basically coming from your existing business. Now tell me, what is the promise? If you're serving 100 customers today, if you're serving 1,000 customers today, can you take this to 10,000? That is what they're trying to see. They're trying to see from the premise, now you move to promise. Now you move to promise, wherein you're going to go and try to show them that, look, out of the money that I got, or out of the money that I got from my existing business, or how I can turn around, how I can, or it's not about turning around, how I can grow the business substantially. That is where the promise comes to. Now you see, everybody knows about White Hat Junior. Did anybody hear about White Hat Junior 3 months back? No, that is because their promise and their delivery has been extremely strong. Okay, so everybody, I would still like to say, if you want to see poster boys of how people have raised money, etc., that those are. But वो कैसे होता है ना? It's like you go to a movie and when you see a hero, you know you'll have all the ideals there. But not everybody is lucky. Like you see one Flipkart, one Amazon, and what are the number of deaths that have happened in e-commerce? And e-commerce used to be phenomenal kind of investment. People have lost money, investors have lost money, founders have lost their business, they have lost their fortunes. Now they are out with their CVs. I'm saying all the debacle came in say 2014, 2015 when e-commerce was extremely heating up. So it got replaced with new kind of ideas. You know, investors then every season there's a theme. Post COVID, there's this theme called as edutech. You know, which is basically very hot with investors. Keep that aside. Let us look at what is basically making money for the investors. That is the first thing that they will ask. That is where your promise comes in. The third and most important P, after which you will never get money in your life, is called as performance. Whatever promises you have made has to basically convert into performance. Or what actually happens is that you get scuttled in between, and till the time you see all the, that is the biggest bridge between a company which has been successful and a company which is not successful. We are saying there are a lot of, see, not all businesses actually need to raise private equity funding. That's the biggest myth. And Anil sir, every time I take a session in family managed business, this is the point I make it very clear. There is no need, if you're satisfied, to go ahead and raise private equity money. Why you should raise? It all depends upon, if you're satisfied, that's the end of it. It all depends upon what is your hunger and what is your objective in life. If you are very, very confident that you don't want an external entity sitting on your board and asking how much amount you spent per day on tea expenses, please don't take private equity. Private equity is not for you, because there will be a third party who is investing money in this company, and he'll ensure that every rupiah's worth he basically extracts out of the company, and he has a right to question. The Constitution under Companies Act has given him a right under minority shareholders, thinks that, you know, he can definitely go ahead and ask you questions, and he can basically block very large decisions that are taken in the community, in the company. He starts with the next round, basically saying that, you know, I want to have representations in audit committee, remuneration committee. This basically says that, you know, when I draw salary, I have to take his opinion, and that's where major fights come in. Why should I ask this guy before? Ye dhanda to maine kiya hai na, I have basically started the whole business. Why should I ask this person? But he's put his money there. He will ask for his rights. So what I'm saying is, the first question, what comes underneath these 3 P's is that, do I need money in the first place? Only because everybody is raising private equity, should I raise private equity? The answer is no. The answer is that you have to make your own decision. This is your independent, individual decision to try to grow the company. And when you're trying to grow the company, and when you're attracting private equity funding, there will always be a requirement of complete transparency. I have to open my books completely and say, this is the money that I make. So unless you want to maintain transparency in your business dealings, please don't take private equity, because the guy who is an investor will walk into your office and make your life miserable and his life miserable. That is the first thing. And this has been taught by Narayan Murthy with Infosys and a lot other organizations, which we call as new age enterprises, where they are basically trying to say is that I am here to protect stakeholders' interest. And where do you see Narayan Murthy and all these people? They come the last in the company. He will be the last person to take the share, take salary in the company. Whenever the company goes through ups and downs, he'll say, I'll sacrifice 80% of my salary. Don't you see Zomato people doing it? Don't you see all the other people who are funded who are doing it? They said that, okay, we are going to cut our salaries. Where the salary gets cut? The salary first gets cut at the CEO level. The salary first gets cut at the management level. Isn't it very painful? You're doing all the work. You know, the investor is come there and he's, but this is the passion at which we run the companies. Now, what typically happens is that this goes stage by stage. I can, again, rewinding you back to the discussion. One is premise, second is promise, and third is performance. And it all, when you come from a family managed businesses, and what is the difference between me and what is the difference between you is that I can go with a premise saying that, look, I don't have anything, but I have built something from scratch out of my own savings, or I have taken money from friends and family, and I have got this business to this stage. Do you like my business? Would you like to invest in this? You know, in this. So a fund says, okay, I'm going to give you something called as a seed capital. Isn't everybody has heard about seed capital? So this is basically the capital that somebody gives you at the first stage to try to show to it that, you know, I'm supporting this guy's idea. Does business model play a role? Definitely yes. Does your industry play a role? Definitely yes. But who is that who is playing the major role? You. When if I am the person who is a seed funder, I give 80% weightage to the person who is running the business, because I don't even know what you guys are saying, whether it is going to make money or तुम लोग मेरा पैसा डुबाने वाले हो कि उसको बढ़ाने वाले हो, मुझे पता नहीं. लेकिन I look at you and I say that, you know, I can trust this person, and that is where your conviction comes, and that is where the storytelling comes, and that is where I'm saying that when you go and approach the investor for the first time, you will have to give your best and be your honest self and try to see to it that how you are able to satisfy this person who gives you money. Family oriented business, we investors, we always feel that you already have a seed money. So premise is gone. Unless you say that, okay, I'm not going to take any help, or my father has given me a little bit of seed money and I'm trying to do something which is basically not related to what my family does. Okay, let us move to the second level now, which is basically a premise. So this is where you see that there is something called as Series A investment. So Series A investment in this country happens between 5 million to about 10 million. So it is like, say, or let me say 3 million to about 10 million. 3 million is about 20 to 23 crores. And then that is where the Series A comes. Series A investors are a little more circumspect. They would ask you a lot of questions. They would like to see business trajectory. They will basically plot everything on latitude and longitude, take you around in Google Maps with regard to finance. And Anil sir will basically, would have already taught you how to construct your P&Ls, your balance sheet, your cash flow statements, your projections, etc. There it gets very clinical. You know, what I mean by clinical is that, you know, they will get right into your numbers and try to see that, okay, what has been the seasonality of earnings, and then 50 other questions that they will keep asking you. So you have to basically pass that test. Finally, you go to the Series B or Series C. I have been a Series C investor, wherein we completely only look at performance. We don't look at anything else. First, we say, okay, aadmi dekh liya, theek hai. I know that this guy. So this is given. We want to, it is given that the person is good. It is given that the idea is good. We want to see how the person can grow our money. So seed funders take the maximum risk. That's why they expect the maximum return. The Series A people are giving you a bridge funding, which is very critical for survival. Even if my idea is great, even if my product is great, even if I have got customer acceptance, even if I make revenues, there is somebody else who is doing 10 times my business. Tomorrow my business will shut down. How many of you have heard about ShopClues, Yep.me, and all that e-commerce platforms which are there? They were all doing good when Flipkart was there. Where are they today? It is only because after Series they have not found any investment, because market gets swept away. You might be doing a fabulous job, but there is somebody who is doing some job which is better than you. Correct? That is where the risk comes from. Please be very mindful of this. Being a private equity investor is the most difficult task. And it has been our experience that, you know, out of 100, at least 50% funds, out of 50 funds go back without making money. So you look at what is basically the carnage that happens to capital. And I'm not saying somebody is wrong. Where did I say that, you know, somebody koi paisa lege bhag nahi gaye? Only things is that the ideas have not survived, or probably the whole flavor of the markets have changed. What used to happen to Oyo rooms? Let us take, this is a classic example. What happened to WeWork? What happened to restaurants? What happened to Barbecue Nation? What happened to mainland China? You know, you look at this, what happened to Tribo hotels? What happened to, you know, there are 100 other, Make My Trip and all these guys. Where are they today? PVR cinemas. It is just takes one COVID to wipe everybody off. Who is the first person to take a hit? It is a private equity investor. So please be mindful of, it is not going to be a very easy job sitting in a private equity investor showroom. And the worst part, you all guys come from business background. What is the worst thing to happen in your business? To lose money, isn't it? So this is what basically one has to traverse. Keep in mind, it is a very tightrope walk. It's an exciting walk. When you take money, I always say that there are 5 types of individuals. One guy is a tourist, and I'm sure all of you like to travel. One guy is a tourist. What the tourist likes to do, basically, you have gone to London, you go to Trafalgar Square, you go to Oxford Street, you do a bit of Buckingham Palace, go to the hotel, and then basically you relax. So that is what is the tourist. What is a traveler? A traveler is a backpacker. He basically goes and stays in hostels. He wants to mingle with local culture, want to understand, and he will not stay in main Paris. He will basically go and stay in Montmartre, and then that is the kind of thing who basically wants kind of experience. The third kind of guy is a trekker. He says, I don't even want a hotel. I want to stay under a tent. The next guy is a mountaineer. He says, I don't even want to go there. I go for adventure, right? So what kind of people, what kind of entrepreneurs, what kind of private equity investors? So for every demand, there is a supply. For every supply, there is a demand. So the beauty of this whole thing is that if you decide to raise funds, there are investors available, and you have to basically fit into what requirements that they have. So the business has to be nimble enough. It's like water. Whatever container I see, it is basically supposed to go and sit into that. So it's a very exciting kind of field, and it is a very, very creative kind of a field. But one has to have a very open mind. Don't think about yourself. Always think about the business. Always think about all the stakeholders. For me, my first stakeholder is my customer, because only if he's there, the entire business is there. If he's not there, everything is short-lived. I can basically hoodwink my investor by telling a good story. I'm a very good salesman. I can go and convince anyone. But how many years this is going to last? That is the thing. Look at State Bank. Survived for I'm saying it has survived for centuries. It will go on for another 300 years. There is not going to be any problem. Every 3 years, the chairman changes. Does anything happen to State Bank of India? No. Why? It is basically the whole bank is built on fundamentals. So that's what I'm saying. The business basically gets built on fundamentals. Have an open mind, and that's the new age of doing business. Look at Elon Musk. We all get excited with this. The kind of promoters that they have. In India, typically, I have seen and you will all of you will agree with me. We always do business which is basically built to sell. Everybody wants to build a business and basically make millions and have a good life, and that has been the attitude. Unfortunately, press has got little to blame out of it. Do we have businesses which are built to last? Your business, you're all family oriented businesses. You all have built businesses which are built to last. And this is the story which is basically coming back to the VCs. Built to sell is something which basically was pre-COVID India. I'm saying post-COVID India, they are saying, show me business that can last forever, that can last beyond your life. And that is basically the new mantras which are coming.
Extremely important. Seed capital, very, very risky. Series A. Sir, this is where I would like to take Dr. Dheeraj Kumar's question. What is the difference between VC and PE funding? So can we say VC is Series A funding?
No, VC can be classified between seed and Series A funding. So, see, what typically happens is that it all depends upon which geography you are. I'll restrict myself to India first. When I say VC, if you're doing anything below 5 million, you will be treated as a venture capitalist, and you're taking the initial bets. The idea is that a lot of investors today say that, we would like to raise whoever gives you the first check, they are called as venture capitalists. They can be seed funders, they can be Series A funders who basically take a larger risk. So the guys who typically come into this would be traditionally your Sequoia or your IDG Ventures or Chirate Ventures and all these people, Bessemer Ventures. And then they're typically, you'll see that, these people have come from a lot of experience. They have tremendous experience of making money and far more better experience of losing money, because they all today are descended out of Silicon Valley. And I think that has been the mecca for venture capital funding and funding for ideas. Typically, what I would also like to highlight to you is that when we say private equity funding is a little bigger. When we say it is about 10 million, say anything in excess of 70 crore. In India, we call this as a private equity funding. In US, you say when you're a P, you say that I'm anywhere over $100 million. So this is basically anywhere over 750 crores investment. It is basically, that's what is considered as a private equity. So it's nothing to do with VC or a PE. It is like the investor's ticket size, and his attitude also changes, or his or her attitude changes completely when people look at what kind of funding has come in. It is like they will ask, the kind of board representations, the kind of rights that they would ask will be a little different. A VC would be much more involved in day-to-day operations. A PE would basically stand out a little bit because, you know, their attribute and their attitude towards investment is little different. So VCs are completely hands-on people. I just love them because, you know, they are through the thick and thin of the company. Private equity investors, from a risk perspective, they're little risk averse. So what they do is that they say, I'll only come in mature stories. I'll not come into initial stages. So that is what is the basic difference.
Next question is from Saurabh. He says, I would like to prepare my company for private equity in the coming 2 to 3 years. What are the steps that we should follow? Saurabh Agarwal.
Great. So it all depends upon which industry you come from. Sir, would you know which industry is? I'll basically give a Bible for that.
Saurabh, if you could chat, but he's very well diversified. I know, but I'm not sure. He's into agriculture. He's into, he's talking about plastic industry this time, not from agriculture part of.
Okay, great. So let me tell you one thing is that investors don't like diversified stories. If you are like, you know, the other day, somebody was asking me that they make huge margins, but they are a trading company. So trading company is basically considered as you are basically arbitraging out of market opportunities. So I'm basically trying to do an elimination for you first. So if anybody is into any kind of trading, please don't go to private equity because that is not fundable at all. And the valuations that you get is 1 times profit. And that's why I'm saying, unless you are a company who is basically doing some several thousands of crores or billions of dollars of you know, import export, don't even think that you know, private equity investors don't invest in trading companies. Now the other problem, Anil sir, I would like to highlight to you, which is what typically happens. You know, let us say I have a family business in which currently like, you know, there was a case which was referred to me. So these people do 3 verticals. Okay, they do something like a cyber security. On one hand, they do it's again a family run business. So they do you know, cyber security at one hand. Other hand, they do something related to recruitment, and third, they do something related to edtech. And they came to us and then they said, look, this is where we want to you know, to raise private equity for the company. So I said, you can't raise money for this company because there is no central theme, because all 3 are independent businesses. And you don't want, you have to only raise money for one particular vertical. Like for what Saurabh is asking, he can raise only money for one particular vertical. So what happens to the other vertical? The investors will say, please get out of those.
Saurabh, I think is a good idea, sir. It is about manufacturing industry for plastic products for agriculture, where they help farmers increase their income by helping them increase their yield. So I think this could be for somebody, as you mentioned in the WhatsApp, for an impact investor, this could be a very good.
Yeah, I'm very happy because, you know, what has actually happened is that after all this e-commerce problem has gone away, a lot of fluff has basically gone away from the market. Agri-tech is one of the very key industries that people are looking at. And they just, everybody, see, there in Hindi we say everything is related to bed chal, you know, it is all, you know, it is all herd mentality that people go ahead and then they ask where we should invest. So everybody has a theme. So today the theme is edtech, but I'm sure that agri-tech is one of the things that is on top of, you know, of everybody's mind, how we are going to basically change, because people have figured out that there is a lot of money to be made in agriculture as against normal convention. So the thing is that if you see in the series of even El Nino or even times when you have got very good rainfall, you know, what typically happens is that the fertilizer company or the seed companies have made phenomenal money. And I don't know if people have studied what the seed companies went through. They were very good Nuzivedu seeds at one point of time. Where are they today? So market has seen a lot of ups and downs with regard to agricultural sector. When you're talking about agricultural implements, the tractor industry, you know, the flagship bearer, Mahindra and Mahindra, you also have Sona based out of North, and they are all doing L&T, John Deere. So basically these people come under something called as agricultural implements, who they give it to the farm sector. Farm sector is something which is of immense kind of importance. So if your product is basically making something close to very high margins, which about where I'll say, sir, are they comfortable with things like EBITDA and all that? Okay. So if you're basically making margins in excess of 25% or something, Yeah. EBITDA is basically profit where you don't account for your interest payouts and tax payouts. So it is basically the core income minus expenses is EBITDA. Sir, we'll put it very simply like this. So if your margins in your business are close to about 25% and above, yes, this definitely calls for introspection. But you have to ensure that if it is a family-run business, you cannot go into any other, you know, any other businesses, which we basically term as a diversion. What is the biggest hurdle for a private equity investor? As a private equity investor, I'll say that, okay, I am giving money to Saurabh, and Saurabh has got 3 businesses. Say, for example, he has got his agricultural business. And hypothetically, let us say he also does something with grains. I'll tell him as a part of the contract that you will not spend even a minute outside this company. If he spends that, then there is going to be court case. Because what actually has happened is that people have taken money and they said that you invest only in company A, but I run company C and company B as well. But what happens is that the promoters basically try to impoverish the company where they have taken money. There is always a risk. And they try to make money in company B, C, wherein company A has actually provided capital. So what happens is that the investors actually have an attitude of ring fencing this, ring fencing their own interest. And they say that, you're like, tan man dhan se aur atma se aap sirf isi dhande mein kaam kar rahe hain jahan pe maine paisa dala hai. So that is something which is a given. So if he has this only line of business, yes, that is something that one can consider. What should be your top line, bottom line, etc. Those things definitely are something to be introspected in the first phase. How attractive this is, so it'll depend upon, please write down, there is something called in business called as entry barrier. What is your entry barrier? Okay, how good is your technology? Have you done something that others cannot replicate? If you are basically trying to do die cast plastic implements, and say tomorrow Anil Menon sir and Karthik Iyer come together and they start doing the same stuff from the same manufacturer and try to take this and give it to the farmers, and they also do the same thing, then there is no entry barrier. So what is so special about your business? That is the first question that I'll ask. When you're talking about impact, see, the attitude in impact is not to make money. The attitude of impact is basically to create an impact where the other person makes money and you get a different satisfaction out of this. Why we are doing impact is because we want to do impact. We don't require. So our objectives come the last. We don't want to earn money out of this business. Please keep that in mind. While we are for-profit organization, when we say that impact, we are doing impact, ours is a for-profit organization wanting to do a social enterprise for impact. But what we will take out of this company is minimalistic. It is just for reinvestment and supporting our salaries. We are not here to build our wealth. If you are there for building wealth, please get this impact thing out of your mind completely. Impact is a very, very different concept. And it is basically more a social service or more a service through which, because if you give a service free, then there won't be any, I'm saying, seriousness for the person. It becomes a donation. So this is where we come. When you are doing impact, you are always focused on making money to reinvest into the company, wherein the end customer or the end beneficiary is benefited and his life is improved. His children start going to school, he gets better sanitation, he gets better homes, he gets better income substitution, or he makes his life more meaningful. And how many people you are basically bringing them up out of poverty? That is where the impact actually happens. Farm sector is a huge sector. I have always born and brought up in cities, but when I spent my initial survey days in farm, I figured out that what is portrayed about India as a poor country doesn't exist. While these people might not flaunt their lifestyles, but these people are incredibly happy people. Let us give it to them. Yeah, there are a lot of ground level problems, but they also know how to be happy. So when it comes to getting a private equity for these kind of businesses, I'm sure that you build this model if you are running a profitable company, if you are doing something which has got less entry barriers so that other people cannot copy what you do, you have got some proprietary technology, a process which others cannot replicate, then that becomes a foundation to get private equity into your company. Hope I've answered, sir.
Absolutely. Saurabh, I would like to add here that you are definitely, if you are looking at it, please look at it now. India, suddenly there is a lot of interest which is coming to agriculture. It is a sunrise sector. And as sir mentioned, if you have a entry barrier and you're doing very well with margins, you should look at it. you should definitely look at it. Agri-tech is the word to go. And of course, I'm always there to help you. So this question came up because I saw a very respected senior right there in the audience list. Saurabh is thanking you, sir. Yes, he's thank you. Anil Biyaniji. So, sir, this is a listed company. Damodar Industries is the name of the company, and this video will address queries of all listed companies. There is something which is known as PIPE, PIPE, right? Would you like to explain that to all the viewers who are owners of listed companies?
Okay, so PIPE is a private investment in public enterprises. So and so when you go to raise money, from investors as private equity investors, where they get money from other investors. So they are called as limited partners who make money in investment in a vehicle which is called as private equity, and this private equity is called as general partners. Okay, so this GPs, as we call it, general partners, who are the private equity companies like my own fund, Oman India Joint Investment Fund, basically has raised money from other limited partners. So that is where this is what is in short, which is basically a foundation of how the private equity investment vehicle is formed. Now, if this company, what is our mandate? Our mandate is basically to invest in unlisted companies. But 30% we can still invest in listed companies. So when we take a decision to invest our money in a listed enterprise, which is basically listed in BSE and NSE, that is basically called as PIPE, private investment in public industry. I'll give you an example. When I was a fund manager in Oman India Fund, we made an investment in a company called as Solar Industries, which are already listed. So that will be categorized as a PIPE investment. So what actually happens is that it is a very easy decision for a fund manager because all the information is available in public domain. Every time you are listed, since you're listed, every quarter, you go ahead and file your financials with the stock exchange, which is available for scrutiny. Tomorrow I can basically call upon you and I say that I want to engage with a dialogue to you, engage in a dialogue with you. And I would like to know more about your company. So it is far like an informed investment. PIPE deals don't make blockbuster returns for investors, and that is one reason why people are judged that they will a fund manager, if he makes a lot of investment in PIPE deals, it's not given due credit because everybody wants to see what has been your contribution in making this company a big thing. So PIPE investments generally give you mixed results, like anywhere between 12 to 15%, but an unlisted company can basically turn blockbuster and it can give you multiple time returns. So just to simplify, it is a private equity company investing in a listed company. That's it.
Can be considered, though it is not in vogue. Private investment in listed companies can also be considered, and there is a comfort level for the investors because it's already a transparent company, it's already a listed company.
I'll add 2 points, sir. Sorry, I forgot. So what you'll have to see is that what is the public float that is available, basically, and what is the trading volumes. So if it is a liquid stock means if there are a lot of shares which are traded, that is the first trigger where we will see that, okay, this is still qualified, where we can go ahead and even look at it from a thing. But if it is not traded, it is marginally traded. Now we will say how do you define marginally traded and thickly traded? So we'll say that, okay, we can just take a benchmark, say, okay, you have about anywhere between 25 lakh to 50 lakh shares which are traded. Don't hold me to this, but I'm saying this is how I see it when I wanted to invest. So if there are in excess of 20 lakhs or 50 lakh shares traded and the value per share is say 100, 200 rupees. So at least I know that there is a 20, 30 crore float which is available. So my investment will directly be a percentage of the float. So I say, okay, if I'm investing 10 crore in this company, how much time I'll get to exit out of this? Because every time I go and sell my stock, the stock price is going to fall. That's why it has to be a very, very deeply traded company. And if it is a thinly traded company, then what typically happens is that the other route how we can exit is off market, wherein I have this company delisted and sold it to somebody else. But in India, that's a very, very tedious process. So your volume should be good, your price should be good, you should have sustained share price graph, which is basically giving good justification that when I have to enter, there is good liquidity available. When I exit, there is good liquidity available. So you would have seen that a lot of banks are doing currently something called as qualified institutional placements. They are raising 10,000, 20,000 crores. Where do they get money from? These are all pipe deals, wherein a private investor is investing. But you look at the trading volumes, you look at the price. Everybody knows that, tomorrow if India grows, the first thing who will run is banks. And that's why banks are raising money. That's why investors are putting money. Every bank tomorrow is going and saying that I'm raising 5,000 crores, 10,000 crores. Where this money is coming? It is all coming from private equity people. And they all know that with growing India, it is going to be a bumper, harvest for them in growing days. So that's where we come to, sir. So this is in short how a pipe deal is basically consummated and how the decision comes through.
So the trading volume matters, and
price stability matters, company performance matters, and the quality of management matters. And
of course, management matters. I think many of you all scored very highly on that. You could please look at the other parameters. So now the next question is come from Dr. Vinod Nair. He says, if a group of friends are planning to start a scalable business, will a PE invest in that, given the fact that all of them have their other businesses also?
So there has to be one identifiable promoter. So what typically happens is that of all people coming together, we see this as too many cooks, and we need to know who is the central command. So all friends can come together. They can invest in a company. I'm saying invest. They can invest in a company, and they can give their bit as investor directors. Of course, they are going to contribute to the company. But there has to be a central command. There has to be one person who is exclusively looking at this business, not doing anything else. Not a problem if you get an outside professional to come and run this. No problem at all. But there has to be somebody who has a single command, who basically drives the operations of the business. And basically, you'll have to have very strong operating agreement between all the partners, who basically will say what is going to be the role and responsibilities of all the people who are basically going to run these businesses. And there should not be any overlaps. There can't be. Sorry, I'm getting into some clauses, but I would definitely recommend you people something called a liquidity preference. It basically says that next time when I raise my capital, we should still hold our own, because many people coming together, that is a bigger risk, as anybody can scuttle the whole process and say that tomorrow I'll not give you go ahead, I'll not give you an okay to go ahead and raise funds, etc. So the operating agreement, the shareholder agreement, the intrusive kind of clauses, these are all things that have to matter. So a short answer to what he has asked, definitely all people can come, but they have to come in as investors. But when the management, the management has to be very unique, and they have to be basically a very, very clear relationship and understanding on who will do what.
That answers the question of Vinod sir, and who has thanked you. There is a next question, sir. What are some major mistakes we should avoid in our journey of preparing the company for private equity or going public? So it's a very interesting question.
Public is a very big question, because public, there are a set of rules which are basically be framed by SEBI under ICDR regulations. So those, I'll not get to that, because it is a 3-day seminar I'll host for, for how to go public. Let me first come to Shark Tank. Okay, Shark Tank is financial entertainment. So there is something called as there's something called as spiritual entertainment. There's something called as sport entertainment, and Shark Tank is financial entertainment. I would recommend all people to go and see Shark Tank, because it is immensely entertaining. But one has to also do a good amount of anything that comes on TV, people are doing it for TRPs, and because they want to have advertisements in between. But what typically happens in Shark Tank is that I would like Mr. Gunny, who has posted this, I would like to tell him that you actually go and see how much of investments this actually consummated after the Shark Tank. They say yes on the show, but these people, when they go and start doing the diligence, it fails. And then they don't do the investments. And a lot of investments have actually gone underwater as well. So they are just showing one side of the story, but the sad story or the happy story, what one doesn't know. Okay. Now, to come back on how to present or how to prepare yourself to do this, is first to ask few questions inside. Inside is that this is called as introspection. I would like to ask this question standing in front of a mirror. First question is that how hard I would like to work towards this. What is my goal in this? Why I want to do this. That's where I love Simon Sinek, when he basically goes and gets into this why thing. It actually answers a lot of questions inside me. Second is that, you know, why I want to do this, you know, why will nobody do? So if my conviction is very strong. So the first point that I would like to do is that conviction speaks in verbal form, in non-verbal form. The conviction speaks through your aura when you basically go and meet an investor. Second is that the business plan has to be impeccable. I'll give you an example. Anil sir, I have given this example time and again when I take sessions in SPJN. Typically is that, you know, there is a guru of ours who basically used to be the managing director of a very large fund. Some guy went to him and then said that he wants 70 crore funding for his pharma factory. So basically he saw the entire finance model and said, what is the budget for your compound wall? So I was saying, what nonsense, why are you asking about a compound wall? He said, no, I just want to know what is the budget for the compound wall. So he said, compound wall budget is 12 lakh rupees. But he's saying, I'm asking 70 crores for you. Why are you getting into the 12 lakh wala item? He said, no, I just want to know what is the, budget for the compound wall. So he said, okay, let me basically try to make up something. So he said, no, the investor said, wait, I'll tell you what is the budget for the compound wall. He basically drew the perimeter and started calculating how much brick is needed, how much cement is needed, how much paint is needed, how much barbed wire is needed. And actually, when he put all the calculation together, it just came to 5 lakh rupees. Saying you can't even calculate the price of constructing a compound wall, which is 5 lakh rupees. You're coming here and asking me for 70 crore rupees. There's something wrong with you or there's something wrong with me. So that is what we need as eye to detail. One has to go through the fabric, which is basically how it is interwoven and, you know, how you would like to basically present yourself. So preparation is the complete key. Storytelling is a complete key, as we say. And at the end of this, I would like to share one deck with all of you that you can circulate. I have basically said that there is this infographic that I got. It basically says that there are these 12 slides that I'm going to share with you. You can share with everyone, you know, which basically technically says what all has to come in your pitch presentation. Please go by that, because I have not found something which is better than this. This is basically a guru mantra of how you start, you know, making your investor presentations. Go through this completely, entirely, and if you yourself will come to know when you read out this presentation in front of the mirror that somebody interested in investing you. So I'll share this, you know, at the end of the presentation. It gives you a 12-step procedure on how to make the presentation, whichever industry you come from. This is basically applicable. This is a beautiful infographic. I'll share it with you, sir.
Thank you. And I will post it on Telegram, sir. Definitely. Yeah. My friends are there on Telegram. So one very important question which I would like you to answer. So when you say valuations, many of the times the valuations are based on assumptions. Would you like to talk to my dear participants on what essentially is the assumptions and how do you decide on the valuations?
See, it is always said that हीरे की परख जौहरी को होती है. So we all go by the same things, that saying that how do valuations come? Let me first tell you a technical way of how you do a valuation. So there is something called as, sir, we all do that, you know, DCF. It is discounted cash flow method of how you arrive at valuation. Valuation all depends upon what future you are showing, what is the money that you attribute towards that, what is the profits that you make, and what are your peers getting. So that is how you are basically put it in 3 buckets. So there is something called as discounted cash flow valuation, wherein I'm giving you a general term. For industry by industry, it differs. Valuation, the whole essence of valuation is not story. The whole valuation essence is performance. What is the performance? So if I'm making 100 rupees today, and if I'm going to make 1,000 rupees tomorrow, your business is going to grow 10x, isn't it? So, you know, that is how your first, you know, scheme of valuation comes in. It is a beautiful scheme of how to do it. And secondly, if you say that somebody else in the market has got that valuation, even I need to get that valuation. Look, they will give you plus or minus 5%, 10% here and there, but that is a very sacrosanct way of how you look at how the valuations are designed and how the valuations are taken care. The third way of valuation is a very organic way of valuation, wherein I go and I defend the valuation to the T. I said, don't look at my competitors, don't look at the industry. I'm going to prove how the valuations are going to come. So this is where people like to hear you, what different you are going to bring onto the table. and how beautifully you are going to explain, how a valuation works. This is one of the most critical things. Valuation is all about perception. Valuation exactly builds through your promise, and it basically takes you to the performance. How quickly you have been able to scale. Have you taken 5 years to reach where you are, or you have taken just 2 years to reach where you are? That is where the delta comes in. I am going to give you more premium because your business has grown faster. You are more agile. You are more grounded. You know how to manage your factors of production like land, labor, capital, enterprise, as we say in economics. So valuation is a mixture of everything. On top of that, basically comes as a valuation cherry. That is you. Basically, am I the right one to drive the business? That is where the valuation comes. For everybody else, the valuation is, say, I'm saying it is 3 times my sale. But I'm saying that, you bring a Virat Kohli inside. You know what happens? That is where the person will look at you and say that, okay, this valuation is justified because I like this guy. So there are a lot of ways of valuation, but you can't take away fundamental ways of valuation. What a person will do on top of valuation is that, I'll say, if DMart is valued at that, why is DMart basically given such a high kind of valuation numbers? They have got far lesser number of stores than the competition. They have got the least ambience as compared to the, but you look at what is the ground level contribution that they do with regard to numbers. What are the build? They all belong to the same retail industry, but why does DMart get this beautiful kind of valuation? So that is one thing to study. That is basically as to how my business is executed and what are the parameters that I go towards and I can ask. Valuation is all about aspiration, how you build it, and it takes phenomenal amount of creativity. I just love dwelling in this because, like sir, we all come after the DCF has been basically done, because then we come and establish, you will come and say that the value of this company is 100 crores. I say, no, this company is not 100 crores. I can basically sell it at 200 crores. That is when the creativity comes in. And that is where your conviction comes in. You basically try to expose every nut and bolt that is fitted in your car and basically come back and say why I deserve this valuation. And that is where the whole conviction comes in when you do a valuation. So there is a fundamental valuation and there is a delta on top of it. That is how a valuation is arrived. And all our businesses, all our past careers have all, if we can attribute some kind of good work that we have done, that is because we have been able to communicate the valuation rightly to the investor, and he has basically invested on our advice and he has made money. That is where the whole satisfaction comes for an investment bank.
So one line I would like to add here, what Karthik ji said before I take some more questions. Value lies in the eyes of the beholder. So that's where the entire game is. So you'll have to look at it from right and give him a set of assumptions by which the investor gets convinced about the value. So the question here again comes down to what is the success rate. So we said private equity is outside investors. They raise money from others and then invest in companies. Today, you have a demand supply scenario. Good companies are being chased by these investors. They go ahead and invest. They will look at moat or entry barriers. They will obviously look at economic analysis, industry analysis, and company analysis, obviously. And then everything boils down to you, the promoter. You also mentioned about that you need to be transparent when you're going to a private equity investor. Private equity investor can ask you a lot of questions, which I don't think we should have a problem, because I personally believe, just one word of advice, if I give 500 rupees to my son, I would obviously go back and ask him, where did you spend that 500 rupees? That's but natural. So we need to, if you have taken outside money, you need to ask, which is where I would like to ask one final question from my side, respected sir, unless somebody has some more questions. What is the success ratio of private equity investors? So in your experience, I know VCs don't have very high success ratios, but the 1 or 2 that they get it right, your Series A, then they make huge money.
Correct.
What has been your experience with private equity investors? Second, when they invest, what are their expected returns?
Okay, so what happens is that private equity investors, so let us look at what are the bank rates. Okay, so bank rates is that if I have to go for a FD, I have to pay, State Bank today gives about 5.5%. I go to a more ambitious bank, they end up giving about 7%. When I take a loan, housing loan is available at about 7% from HDFC. I'm just trying to stack it up so that you understand where this is coming from. So these are all risk. As your risk keeps going down, your returns also keep going down, isn't it? So once I go to a little bit of a more tactical financing, wherein I do a business finance, wherein I still do a secured finance, but it is secured against basically my goods or a thing. the interest cost goes up to about 10%. When I do personal finance, it comes to about 12 to 13% because it's an unsecured lending. And typically, if I have to do microfinance, because I don't even know whom I'm lending to, then the return expectation goes to about 18%. This is what happens with a bank. Okay, so let us look at what private equity investors, because they have maximum risk and their return expectations are also maximum. So I think even if you can justify that, the investor will walk out about 25% IRR, internal rate of return, rate every year you're making about 25% return on your investment. That is what is the return expectation, that if you can prove that so the investor has to basically feel confident that you will be basically making about at least 25%. So I take all the assumptions that you're given. You have told me that your money will become 3 times, 4 times, etc., and I basically strip down it to basic level, basic risk. At that basic risk, if I'm making 25%, and then we decide to go ahead and make the investment. What is the reality? The reality is very sad. It depends upon what time you have made this investment. If you decided to make the investment in 2007, all your money is gone because of Lehman Brothers. If you decide to make the investment when Modi ji had basically got voted to power just 3 months before that, everybody has made money. If you decide to come now, pre-COVID, and you have made all your investments in the last 1.5, 2 years, all the money is gone as it is. So it all depends. You can't time the market. Good investor basically will chase good stories, and he will have something called as another P, which is called as perseverance, and that is where it makes all the changes. So ye jigar lagta hai yaar. It is in investing. You really need to have a lot of perseverance and confidence in your own self. You have to be extremely hardworking, and then you have to be grounded to understand. You should be able to, like promoter, when they come and present to us, we will have to basically separate the milk and the water, and try to see what is there in black and white, because there will be a lot of gray areas in when you do an analysis. So some question has basically come: how do investors consider gestation? Okay, a fund has a life cycle of close to about 7 years. So if we invest in year 1, by year 7 we'll have to go out. What is the gestation? Is that any fund wouldn't mind being invested for about 5 to 6 years, but at the 7th year they would itch to basically go out, or basically that is the end of their fund cycle, and that is what is the gestation period for any fund. So typically there have been more failures than successes for private equities, because you can't time the market, you can't time the investors. Some businesses might do extremely well, but the environment would change for bad, as I gave examples to you, and it is nobody's fault that it happens. So it's a very risky job to be a fund manager. It is far more risky job to be an investor. But higher the risk, the higher the return. That is what we say in financial management, and it all boils down to that. And this is basically a practical story. 80-20 rule applies everywhere. No, I'll basically say 95-5. So please don't get disheartened. it is a eventual story. So it is always a mixed bag. And if you go to raise funds, that is your acid test. People say that as an investor, if you go to raise funds, and if I have said that out of 10, even if I have basically made money on 4, I am a very good fund manager. Now it is for you to decide, what is good and what is bad.
So that's a very interesting observation, that, out of 10, even in 4, they make money. That's supposed to be good. In these times, are investors looking for specific sectors?
Okay, let me basically tell you what the investors are not looking at this this point of time. Investors are definitely not looking at anything where people come together because of COVID. Really, one really doesn't know. So anything related to, say, restaurants, or we all know that, exhibition kind of businesses, people are staying away. So what has COVID done is that new education policies, that is coming up. That's a huge sunrise sector. Education is a huge sector, because all our children are sitting at home and basically doing classes on Zoom. And Anil sir, you are the best beneficiary out of this, because what is technically going to happen is that it's basically going to completely change the landscape. 45%, I think 30-40% of your courses can be vocational, non-vocational. This is completely blasting the space out of this. So education, healthcare, financial services, anything to do, this will all be in vogue for the next 4 or 5 months. But trust me, what I would love to communicate is that we are going to see a new emergence of a very new kind of concepts. Like people have gone back to work. We'll have to see whether they are coming back to work. We are seeing a little bit of migration, pressures easing off. People are very happy with what they are. They are very content. Consumption pattern is going to change. Urbanization pattern is going to change. Income patterns are going to change. People are saying, I want to take vocational employment. So everything is going through a complete reshuffle. People have to be ready. People have to be ready with manufacturing, with a new age kind of enterprises, with waste management, and all this suddenly becomes very relevant. So people keep asking me what is going to happen after COVID. I said there is nothing called as a COVID and pre-COVID and post-COVID. Things are not going to normalize. It is going to be, it's like, you are wearing a mask and somebody just comes on in an empty street. He basically walks in your direction. You're so paranoid that you want to cross the street and go, what has happened to us at one point? At other point, you see that when local trains start, people will go back to normal. It is going to be a very confusing kind of a scenario. So where this is all going to take us is that fundamental sectors will remain fundamental sectors. Manufacturing is basically going to drive the entire nation. We said, okay, we are doing great in services. What is going to happen to manufacturing? You are going to see everything getting. I'm extremely bullish on manufacturing sector, and you'll see a lot of automation basically coming into this sector, like farm sector. Anything that is going to be revenue accretive for you in the coming days is going to be defense. Anybody who is basically doing any kind of ancillary for defense, that is becoming super critical today. So all put together, you'll see a resurgent India at the end of probably after the vaccine comes out, and nothing that is relevant today is going to be of relevance to, a lot of things that were relevant pre-COVID are not going to be relevant post-COVID. So we are going to see a new emergence. Everybody's in a wait and watch mode. People are making investments today, but they are at a ultra cautious level. A lot of money used to come from China. That will, in my opinion, will go out. And trust me, they were very, very easy funds to raise money from, but they are gone today. So the landscape is changing drastically. So it is going to be a challenge, and I can't actually point my finger and say that, okay, these sectors are going to do well. I already said which sectors are going to do well. One has to basically wait and watch and just try to see, how this thing pans out after the vaccine comes. But India with a large consumption population, I am bullish on India at least till the next, at least till I live on this planet. And I think this is a phenomenal place to be.
So, wonderful. You could see the last line was full of optimism. So I was smiling because this is actually a PE investor speaking. So they will have a dark cloud, but they will look at the silver lining. So if you could realize the last 4 minutes, my colleague was the actual PE investor came out, right? When he started looking at the, Karthik ji started looking at the optimistic things in life. Having said that, dear colleagues, before, sir, please look at the chat. There is a thanks for you. Especially Gani is joined in from US. Saurabh Bete is the colleague who asked for this session.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So Dr. Vinod Nair also says it was really good. Right?
My pleasure, sir.
Anil Biani sir is writing excellent to you, sir. He is the
Thank you very much.
The director of Damodar Industries. Colleagues, so what is the learning from today before we summarize in 2 minutes? Private equity is a new age of funding. Are you ready for it? If you are ready for it, you have to be transparent. You have to be ready to take questions. If you are not able to take questions, then please don't go after this. Be happy in life. Just because XYZ has done it, don't do it. Yes, once you are ready, please prepare your elevator pitch properly. Your first presentation has to be very, very good, which is where an investment banker really matters. Then once you talk about valuation, valuation is very subjective. It lies in the eyes of the beholder. Today is challenging times, but still certain sectors are expected to do well, right? So you can go ahead and raise money. Exit by these investors will either be listing on a stock exchange or they will sell it to some other investors, as happened with Flipkart. Yes, you can also, being a listed company, you can also take money, equity from private investors. This is known as pipe deals. It's also very, very important. So if you are looking for an elevator pitch, please note that you should have what is called as an entry barrier. Along with an entry barrier, you should be very, very clear that the investors are looking for returns, right? The investors are very are keen on returns because they have taken money from some other set of people, private equity investors. Sir has been in the industry for a long time. He has worked on the investment side. At the same time, he has raised money, right? Basic thing that sir says, is for a private equity investor is they should have perseverance. And for investees, right, like y'all, please note, you need to have what is known as a moat. A moat is something which protects you against competition. And more importantly, you need to have a vision. You need to have a vision that yes, the business is scalable. One very important question which came up is, right, is this going to continue? The answer is yes, right, this trend is going to continue. Is our family managed businesses suitable? Right, sir says there is no such distinction. Even if it is family managed business or a startup, anybody can come. It all depends on three things, if I may say: scalability, profitability, if not today, at a later stage. Third, right, as I keep saying, do they have a differential blue ocean strategy? With this, sir, thank you very, very much for a wonderful conversation style.
Thank you very much. It has been a real pleasure speaking to and addressing all of you. I really enjoyed this session. Anil sir, it's like, I really love all the sessions that I have with you. You're such a wonderful person and, a great senior. We all look up to you. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope, I have not dashed or I have not spoken something which was not acceptable to everybody, because you all are in the business of speaking what is the fact. And then again, thank you all for your patience, patient hearing. And sir, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wish all the participants all the best. We are always here to guide you on whatever you want. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Karthik sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shanti ma'am. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night, all of us. Thank you.